We are in this beautiful space. Can you describe this space for us real quick?
This is the Atlanta Photography Group Gallery.
Okay.
And they have shows pretty regularly, and they allowed us to have the Streets magazine print party. So we printed our books, and we're celebrating another year of the Streets, and we invited all of our Atlanta artists to come and show their work.
Amazing. So we are back with Meredith Howard of the Streets magazine in the Atlanta Photography Group space for a follow-up part 2 of our podcast episode, which came out in season 2, and we talked about everything from you switching out of accounting and going into owning your own business with fashion, and then learning how to get into photography and being inspired by street photography and blogs like the Sartorialist and Garance de Ray, and just exploding from there to now about, 2 years formally of doing the Streets? This
is our third year, yes.
Third year, okay.
Yeah, so we started in 2016, just wrapping up the third book. Okay. The third year,
So when we kind of left things in season 2, you, Meredith, were coming into the 11th issue? The 11th digital issue?
Yes.
Okay.
So we published the 11th digital issue August 15th, and then we roll straight into reformatting everything for the print version.
Okay.
So we published 4 issues digitally this year, so I take all of those and kind of reformat the look, and I had to condense it down because when I first put it together, it was like 500 pages. So I got it down to 350 pages. So I kind of edited, reformatted, and put it together for the print version of all of the issues.
So the print comes out every year.
Yes.
And each year you publish the 4 digital issues that culminate in this big print release. And we had you bring 2 for the studio podcast episode that we did, but none of the listeners could
couldn't actually see it.
So this was actually your idea to come utilize this beautiful space and do this audio video podcast, which is brilliant because now people can see how awesome this actually looks. The 2018 edition is the thickest one yet.
Yes.
So number 3, we've got the same font, very similar layout to 2016 and 2017.
Yes.
So keeping with this consistent theme, it feels more or less exactly the same in terms of the physical product.
It's pretty much the same. It's just getting thicker every year.
Okay. So now
I'm going to try to keep it this size. This is a good size. I don't hope to go any bigger, but I think it's a great size for this year.
So how many?
So it's 350 pages.
350.
Yes.
Okay. 350 pages with pretty thick paper.
Yes.
Which gives kind of a lot more weight to the physical product. Really, really crisp everything from the lettering to the fonts on the inside to how you've structured the photography in here and the artwork and the interviews and everything. The weight, first of all. Let's go with just the size of the book and the thickness and the number of pages. Is this something deliberate that you're trying to add more weight to the book every year as you grow, or is this just kind of a natural organic growth from the traction that you've built?
I think it was just natural this year. We just had a lot more material. I just think every year it gets a little bit bigger. I'm going to try to curtail that a little bit to try to keep it about this size going forward. I don't really want it to get bigger in the print version, so I'm trying to be more mindful going into next year about the amount of content, digital content, because when you have digital content, you're not thinking as much about pages because you can publish as many pages digitally as you want to.
Right.
So, but going into next year, I'll probably be more mindful about that and thinking about what the final version is going to look like.
Got it. We talked last time on the show about themes.
Yes.
So does the 2018 book have a theme?
It does. I usually think of my themes after the fact, like after I get all of the material, I think, what does this have in common? Like kind of what is this saying? What's going on in the world? What do people need to hear? And I came up with the theme of generosity because I felt like kind of right now people are a little bit fearful, maybe politically contentious, And I felt like all of the artists in the book were exhibiting a generosity of spirit. And that's kind of how street photography is in its essence, because most street photographers don't get paid a lot of money for what they're doing. They spend hours taking these photographs, working on their craft, and they're not getting paid. They're just doing it because they love the art, they like people, or they like buildings, they like the world, they're trying to investigate. They're doing it. And then like street artists who spend 2 full days for free painting downtown a huge mural just so that when someone drives by, you can see this beautiful mural and be inspired. I mean, that's very generous.
Right.
Now, some of the people we featured in here did get paid some for their work, but still I feel like everybody exhibited a generosity of spirit. And even we've featured some people who are doing other things in the community, like Terrence Lester and Focus Community Service Strategies that spend a ton of time working with poor and homeless and redeveloping neighborhoods in South Atlanta. And it was just all kind of a generous feeling to the artists that were in the book. So that was kind of the overall theme. And then I thought, in particular, this photograph on the cover that we put on the cover by Tony Mack. He lives in South Africa.
Okay.
And I just loved this photograph because I just felt like it was it's a picture of one man serving another man dinner in the middle of a street.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a generous thing, kind of an extravagantly generous thing to do.
Right.
That you don't, something unexpected. And I just thought it kind of captured the theme really well.
On 2 fronts, I think. It captures the generosity theme while staying true to this idea of street style, street fashion, street culture. Literally 2 guys dressed to the nines.
Yeah.
This kind of white linen tablecloth with fine glassware and almost butler-like service in the middle of an actual street. Right,
yes.
So it's an embodiment of everything kind of the magazine hopes to stand for, with composition as well as with style and theme. So I think it really captures everything you're trying to do really well. Nice.
And I actually struggled with, should I put this on the cover or not? Because it's not technically a street photograph. I mean, really big sticklers on street photography because it's not candid. I mean, it's posed. They obviously took the table out there and sat in the street and styled it. But his photography kind of made me think about the idea of redefining the streets, and it's kind of what I have been trying to do all along. Because traditionally, I think when you think of the streets, you think of crime and poverty and drugs. But I think for me, it's a place where I connect with strangers, I get out of my bubble and kind of see what else is out there. I meet other creatives. So kind of in the thought of redefining the streets, I thought it's okay to step outside the boundaries of street photography and redefine it a little bit.
And at the end of the day, it's your magazine, it's your product, so you
so
have
I can do
the
whatever
liberty.
I want.
You can, and I think I am not a street photographer. I'm not in this inner sanctum of people who will nitpick at the details and the craft, right? But I get it. Someone who is creatively inclined and works with a lot of artists, you're going to piss maybe a couple of people off, right? Maybe 5% of your base. But I think overall, you are still pushing that needle forward and what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's what's important. If you're not pissing a couple of people off along the way, you're not doing something big enough, right? You're not making an impact.
Yeah.
So we talked on the last episode about the first release and how you were struggling to put together this party, and you were really looking for kind of the sign from God and the universe and saying, help me throw this party, help me make this manifest. And on Saturday, this past Saturday, which was November 10th, don't know when this is going to come out yet, but November 10th, this past Saturday, you had a big release party for the 2018 print edition right here in this space, all around us with all of this artwork up with food and drinks and music and a ton of people. And it was a raving success. And so tell me about how this party compared to the first release party and what went into planning the actual release event.
Yes. My friend said, you have to have a release party. And I was like, what? Because I was spending all my time getting the print version out. I'm like, I don't have time to throw a party. Anyway, we had it in Spalding Nick's gallery. But we didn't have any of our art displayed. He just let us use his space. We had a party, launched the books. The second year, Eventide Brewery was let us use their space, and Familyhood helped us out with that, and they kind of helped hang the artwork and coordinate the artists. So I kind of felt like that showed me, okay, we can do it. We can actually coordinate this with all the artists. So I wanted to try it myself. And I was looking for a small space. This was a little bit bigger than I was looking for. And I really was slightly overwhelmed, but when I thought about this space and they said it was available on our date, I always try to do, if I feel a little bit overwhelmed, I think, yeah, I should probably do that.
Yeah.
I need to challenge myself. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit scary, and a huge job coordinating, getting all the art put up, and then also coordinating food and drinks and entertainment and everything else. But it got done. It was great. It was a great success.
Great. It looks, imagine this space, everyone watching, right? Imagine this space around us, packed with people, music. There's this beautiful sense of community that all of these works kind of aim to embody, right?
Yes.
And I think that while the photography and the book kind of speak for themselves, the fact that you're able to see that physically, interactively in this space, and how it continues to bring people together even after the works are published, I think that is such a cool representation of what you're trying to capture through the book, brought to life.
Yeah. And it was fun because we got to there's several things. This year I was very conscious of the fact that I sometimes have quirky ideas that I'm like, no, that's too weird. I'm not going to do that. So I've been trying this year to kind of push my quirky ideas forward and go with them. So
like what? What's an example of a quirky idea?
Two things for the party. We were trying to think of what snacks do we want at the party, and I thought, well, I like bacon. Everybody likes bacon. Let's just have some bacon. So, and some people were like, that's kind of weird. You're just going to have a pile of bacon? Like, yes. So we have bacon. I like chocolate chip cookies. Let's have chocolate chip cookies. I like olives. And then we're like, let's just throw in some cheese and crackers for a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah, I love all of those things. And when I was here, I certainly had some bacon, but the chocolate chip cookies, they're my weakness.
Yeah.
Any quality of chocolate chip cookie, and my girlfriend will always be like, on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'll be like 5 out of 10. She's like, not worth it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like anything above a 1. Any
Anything
chocolate chip cookie.
cookie.
So I had my fair share of chocolate
chip cookies, bacon go great together.
Yes.
And then we had dancers. We had filmed a video in January, actually inspired by Kevin's abandoned building photos. And so I thought, is that weird to have dancers at an art party? And then I'm like, we're just going to do it. So we had 2 dancers, Cordero and Andre, and they did an awesome job, and it was a lot of fun. And I think it was just, it makes it more memorable and just interesting.
Yeah, I came in kind of right as the dancing was going on. They were doing like this like futuristic robot style kind of street break combination.
Animation.
Animation.
What you call it. Although when I say animation, people think about drawing. It's not that kind of animation.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
I'm lacking the proper language to describe this embarrassingly on my own show, but it was it was a really cool thing to see, an added layer of bringing that culture to life, making it come out of the book, bringing it to life, and further kind of highlighting the message in here, and making people, kind of forcing people to touch it, right? To interact with the message that you're putting across on the page. Now you have to step into it in real life. Now you got to see the people behind the artwork. You got to see the people behind the camera and in front of the lens, and the type of culture that you're trying to manifest through this. This issue contains how many different artists and contributors?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was going to count before I came.
That's okay. We'll just kind of go through and look at some examples.
40. Let's see. Probably about 40. 40.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not speaking to the mic.
So let's say 40. Seems fairly representative considering how big this is. 40 contributors. You were talking about the theme of generosity.
Yes.
These people's works, both artists and subject, of just creating something beautiful for the sake of creating something beautiful and capturing beauty. In what way did generosity has and continues to play in the interaction that you have with the people that you work with regards to how you curate and source the content for the end product?
Well, I think everyone that's involved in it is just very generous. I mean, I don't pay them for their material, to be allowed to use the material. We don't make any money off the books. We actually sell them for below cost, if anyone was wondering. We don't make money off the books. We would like to one day, but at this point, that's not really in the forefront. We're just trying to get the material out there and kind of learn the process and get the process down. But everybody's so generous in allowing us to use their photographs, answering all of our questions, talking to us, answering follow-up questions, sitting down. We did a lot more in-person interviews this year. Even like Matthew Warren, I thought it was really interesting how he comes up with his photo shoots and concepts. So I asked him if he could just put together a photo shoot and we could follow him around and interview them while he was doing his shoot. So we just spent a few hours. He just put together a shoot. We asked him questions. We photographed him while he was doing the shoot. I mean, he didn't have to do that.
Right.
We didn't pay him to do that, but it was super fun for all of us.
That's cool.
It's just everybody's just been very generous in the content they've submitted for this.
Well, what is the typical dialogue in kind of the ask of getting someone to contribute to the magazine? Do you find that you're reaching out more, or that others are reaching out to you more now, since you have kind of achieved this level of success with the first 2 print runs?
People are definitely reaching out more to me. I would say in the past 2 years, it was more me reaching out to them, but I think now people are finding out about it and reaching out to me. So it's kind of half and half. But usually I just come across somebody's work and I think it's awesome. And so I'll just contact them, either try to meet them. If they live in Atlanta, try to go to one of their shows or meet them at a show and ask them in person or call them. Or I do a lot of messaging through Instagram. I find a lot of stuff on Instagram. And just say, I love your work. I would love to sit down and talk to you about it. Would you be interested? And most people are totally up for it. And so we've had a great response. But yeah, I would say we definitely started with Instagram. Now I meet a lot more people through shows or through another artist. If I talk to one artist, they'll say, well, you really should talk to so-and-so. They're great too. And so I'll kind of follow a trail that way.
I think the arts community and the Atlanta community kind of come together to form this perfect little bubble of people wanting to introduce you to other people, right? There's these network effects that are realized when you just put yourself out there and say, hey, I care. I'm creating something that I think is valuable, that I think does service to those other people who are creating in my community. I find that people, in doing this show, I find that people are super excited to say, oh, hey, you got to meet so-and-so. Let me make a warm intro to this person. Come to this showing, come to this whatever exposition. And yeah, it highlights that generosity point again, and that the community is eager to give back, not just willing, but really excited to contribute and give back through their work, through their time. There's a few Atlanta artists and photographers in here, as well as photographers from around the world. So do you know roughly maybe how many countries are represented in this, if you had to?
Wow. I don't know numbers, but I can tell you, so South Africa, Amsterdam, Hungary, where else did we have? We had someone from Italy. Now I'm drawing a blank. But lots of people from different places.
But that sense of community is still kind of...
Cheat and look a little bit and
That's
see
okay.
if I missed anybody.
That's why it's on the table. But again, it's this idea of community. It transcends just Atlanta.
Oh, Chile.
Right? I see India in there.
India. Oh, yeah. So we had 3 articles on India. And Colombia.
Okay. So what?
I think that was it.
At least 5 or 6 countries represented in this book, which is, you were talking about the theme of the book taking on a more international flavor as you've grown. Is that something that, again, is that deliberate? Are you trying to represent, are you trying to make explicit the international theme? Or is it more really about just the pure content, regardless of where it's from?
I think it's more about the content. I was thinking about that the other day. Someone posted on Instagram a kind of a rant about a lack of diversity in some certain art show. And I was thinking, are we diverse enough? It kind of always makes me step back and think, oh my goodness. And I looked through there and I was like, because I don't consciously think about diversity of race or gender. I kind of think more about diversity of art. So I think just naturally in seeking out different styles of art, I find different types of people because different people tend, produce their own style of art. So I think more about, I need something, I don't have anything that's kind of like this, and I'll kind of look for a different style or something. So I think it just in my searching for different styles of artwork, it leads me to a diversity of different types of people, different countries. And then I think also once you find one person, like the artist that's featured on the cover, I found him through, it was like several layers of different artists. So Piccolo, who is featured on one of the first pages, this photograph was also taken by Tony, who took the cover photograph. But at that point, I hadn't seen the rest of his work. I knew I loved this photograph, but Piccolo actually submitted all these photographs from that were taken in Italy. And then through him, I started tracking down other photographers who had just given him photos. And that's how I found Tony. And I'm like, oh my gosh, his work is amazing. And he lives in South Africa. And since then, I've met other people that live in South Africa. Another man that we're going to feature in probably the next issue. So it kind of just leads from one person to the next. And once you get in the international realm, then it kind of goes all over. But I like that. I did at one point consider, would it be better if I focused just on Atlanta? And then I thought, I feel like, especially now that just in our thoughts of getting out of your bubble, that you need that international perspective, because if we just focused on Atlanta, it would get a little bit in an Atlanta bubble. Even though there's a lot of diversity within Atlanta, it's still a certain type of bubble that's very different from other countries. So I like having the international content and perspectives just to kind of, so we can reevaluate, people think differently than we do, and their lives are completely different than ours. So I like that balance of different perspectives from around the world.
I think with what you're doing, it's necessary. I think that understanding kind of street culture is, you have to go outside of the realm of just one environment. And Atlanta being a singular case. And we talked on the first episode about how just culturally people respond differently to someone taking their picture on the street, right? And I think you need that breadth of perspective in the magazine for it to really kind of highlight the point that you want to get across successfully. And I think you've done that here. In looking at Piccolo's kind of section here in the first part of the book, there's a lot of there's photography, obviously, but there is a little blurb from yourself, and there's interview content as well. So it's a written interview. I presume you are asking the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
If they are here in Atlanta, then I will sit down and talk to them, because I feel like that creates a better interview. And I've been thinking about going forward of trying to do more Skype interviews or something over where we can at least talk, because I like the email interviews and we do get some information, and some people write really well, so that works for them. And then other people, I feel like it's better when they can just tell you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to work on that going forward, because I feel like some of the interviews would be better and we could get more information and more stories from them if we were talking kind of face to face over the web somehow. So I'm going to work on that next year. Okay.
So that's a 2019 goal, and looking forward to seeing even more in-depth content through that. There's sections in this book where you highlight street artists. One in particular, Atlanta native Chris Veal.
Yes.
Here on page 130.
So I've been wanting to interview him for a while, and I happened to see on his Instagram that he was going to be painting a mural, and so I messaged him and I said, hey, can I come photograph you while you're painting and interview you? So I just went down there while he was painting this huge mural of Blondie, and we talked, and I took pictures, and then he submitted some photographs of his older work, and then I've been trying to collect some photographs because I've been wanting to do an interview. So every time I see a mural or something of his, I'll take a photograph of it. I've been saving up. So
some of these are taken by yourself.
Yes.
Some taken by Chris.
Yes.
Is Chris himself a photographer by trade, or is this just
He is
documenting
not.
his work?
No,
Okay.
I think he was just documenting his work.
Okay, but it's really cool how you've built out these compositions, because you have examples of just the artwork, whether it's the mural photograph taken by Chris or yourself. You've got here on page 134 a street scene,
Yes.
right, of somebody walking past part of the mural outside of Noni's with Chris in the background actually
Yes.
painting. So you can see Chris on the ladder, you see this street scene, and then you've got this little section here on page 135 that is little screen grabs from Chris's phone of different options of the mural that
Yes.
he's sending to the owner of Noni's. So you see kind of the end-to-end process, and you see this street art in a way that is a little bit different from the traditional street photograph of a person, right? So in what ways are you trying to kind of, you mentioned this earlier, change the parameters and the bounds of what is street photography in here? So taking pictures of street artists making their work and collaborating in that regard is one.
Right.
But in what ways are you kind of pushing against those kind of street photography traditionalists who say that this is not street photography?
Well, that I feel like maybe more traditional street photography, and not traditional, but more than a posed photograph. I mean, none of, like the ones that we took of him painting, I mean, those weren't posed. He was just painting, and he would have been there painting whether I was standing there or not.
Got
So, but I like to incorporate pictures of them actually creating their art. I think that's interesting while they're talking about how they created their art. I think one thing I really want the Streets magazine to do is encourage other people, or encourage the readers to create their own art or do their own thing. Even if it's not traditional art, they can do it in a creative way. And that's why the last article in here, I always title "Not the End," like you'll see on the bottom of the page. The last, this one from Tony Mack, showing his work, the artist from South Africa, I titled it "Not the End" because his story I thought was inspirational in the fact that he grew up in a township in South Africa, in a poor community, had to cross a river twice to get to school every day. And
townships, for people who aren't familiar, was set up by the South African government during apartheid to essentially segregate blacks from whites. And townships are a churched up pretty name given to essentially really impoverished ghettos on the outskirts of big cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town in South Africa. So really, really colorful culture, but through this kind of history of severe oppression and segregation. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No,
I just
that's
wanted to
fine.
give a little bit of context to that.
So he grew up in a township, but he went to a university. Now he works as a microbiologist in Johannesburg. But he also, in his spare time, creates these amazingly beautiful photographs. And then he went back to the townships and decided to establish a foundation to help other children obtain an education. And he takes photographs to kind of make people aware of the situation, but also to physically give back and help pull other people out of their impoverished situation. So I just thought that was a great story of, it is not the end. If you grow up in a poor community and feel like you have no creative outlet, like there's always something you can do. And so I want to inspire people to do creatively whatever they're doing. I mean, Terrence Lester, who works with Love Beyond Walls here in Atlanta, he's a great example of that because he's not an artist, but he does everything very creatively. His ministry helps the poor and homeless, but he always does things in a very creative way. Like right now, they are building a homeless museum. So it's like this, I don't know what you're calling it. It's like this big trailer that they've converted into a museum. So it's a mobile museum they can park in different parking lots, like at schools or churches or office buildings. And they're going to set it up so I haven't seen it because they haven't finished it yet, but they're working on it to somehow experience the experience of being homeless.
Interesting.
So that you can kind of enter into that experience and feel it yourself. So, I mean, I mean, I just thought that was such a creative thing to do.
It's crazy to think that people would pay, or I don't know what the ticketing system is.
I think it's probably going to be free, I'm assuming.
It's interesting people would volunteer to feel homeless. And I wonder what, me being kind of a little bit cynical about these things, I wonder really what the impact of that is going to be, if it just gives people this kind of brief sense of goodwill without any action. I don't know. Hopefully there is something that comes of that. I think it's an interesting concept. We talked about homelessness a lot on the first part of the podcast. We talked about that and prison recidivism rates.
Yes.
That's a mouthful for me for today for some reason. But so homelessness and prison recidivism rates being something that you are trying to integrate as part of this kind of socially active voice that the magazine embodies to an extent. Very similar to this not the end section here in the book. To what extent are homelessness and prison recidivism or just general social issues present in this book, and how much of that do you want to resonate across to people as a part of your message versus just the artistry?
Well, I definitely think that art is a great way to get serious issues across to people in maybe more of an approachable way, but also, like I was saying, like in a creative way. I mean, people sometimes feel overwhelmed by big social issues, but I think we can all step back and be like, well, what can I do? Like, what's one small way I can look at this in a creative way, just where I am? Like, what can I do? Just a small thing. Like, you don't have to set up a whole foundation or organization to help other people, but there's something probably that everybody notices more than other people, or thinks about, kind of feel like tugs at their heart a little bit more. And it may be just something small. It may be their neighbor next door or the person that works at the grocery store or whatever. But just to kind of encourage people, I think a lot of people have ideas or maybe urges to do things and they just never act on them. So I think one of our big things is just start. And it doesn't have to be an overwhelming thing. And that's one thing, like I feel like I always trick myself into doing everything I do because I've learned I can't think about all the little tiny details that it's going to take to accomplish something. If I feel like I need to do something, or you feel like, oh, someone needs to fulfill that need, or someone needs to create this art, or I have this great idea, and then you start thinking through all of the steps it's going to take to get there, you'll be like, I'd rather just watch TV tonight.
You mentioned this in part one, and when you started this, someone had come up to you and said, hey, do you want to talk to so-and-so person who has a lot of experience in this and they can tell you how to start a magazine? And you said no, because you're like, if I know all of the little things that I need to do to make this happen, it's not going to happen. I'd rather just kind of jump in and do it. And that has evolved into this over time and over practice, and over practicing specifically one concept that you talked about a lot towards the end of part one, which was looking at something that scares you and making a point to do it because it scares you, breaking through that fear. So in kind of encapsulating that theme of breaking through fear and making it something that you practice deliberately and have gotten better at over time, how did this book come together, and what aspects of it involved you kind of pushing through that fear and looking at it straight on and driving forward? Every
year there are new big issues that we have to overcome. I think we have it down. I'm like, oh, next year's going to be so much easier because we've been through it and we know what all the issues are, and every year there's something different. This year we had to find a new printer because our printer from last year shut down after we thought, oh, this will be easy because now we have a printer, and then they shut down. So we had to find another new printer. So we really worked hard to try to find someone local, and there are a lot of great printers here in Atlanta, but we ended up going with a printer in Dallas called Jarvis Press, and they did an awesome job, but just talking to all the different printers, interviewing them, getting samples. We even had them print samples from last year's book so we could compare them side by side and
Oh,
lay
okay.
it out. So it was kind
Smart.
of a long process. And actually, Christy Ryan, who's been working with me this year, she came up with that idea. I was like, I didn't think of that last year.
Yeah.
So that was a great idea. So we could literally lay them out and see the quality from our material from last year.
Yeah.
So went with Jarvis, and then of course there's always issues. Like they tell me the size of the spine, and I've never even thought that much about the spine because the printer always tells me this is the size of the spine. Okay, done. And they sent me the sample, and I was like, this doesn't look right. It looks too big. And they're like, let's go check that out. And they're like, you're right. And I'm like, why did nobody notice it at the printer? I don't know.
Right,
But
right.
I mean, I had never dealt with that. So then we had to try to figure out those measurements. And like, that's an issue. Like, so that took like 3 days going back and forth trying to figure out the measurement of the spine,
Right.
which I've never, in the past 2 years, has never been an issue.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
every year there's just something. But it's funny because one of my favorite books to read is a book by Robert Rodriguez. I don't know if I mentioned this on the first podcast,
I don't know
but
if you did.
it's called A Rebel Without a Crew, because he's a filmmaker who
Okay.
made Spy Kids and Sin City and a bunch of other stuff. But his very first movie, like he had no crew, and so he literally was like filmed everything himself. They used a wheelchair as a dolly. They like used an actual prison for the prison scene. They like, I mean, all these crazy things. And he says other directors say, at what point am I going to get in my career when I stop having all these issues? I just want to direct a movie. And he's
Yeah.
like, all of those issues is the job. Like, that's your job, dealing with all the issues.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like, you will always have all those issues. So I think that's what it is. Like, you just know you're going to have different issues, and you're just going to have to figure them out next year. So-
Anybody who has that team behind them, you listen to, we'll take this podcast, for example, as we're talking about this book, trying to make a kind of a tangent comparison. You hear at the end of all of these big production podcasts, today our show is produced by this person, this person, this person, this person, music by this person, editing by this person, funding by this group, blah, blah, blah. And with this podcast, this is it. What you see is the whole show, you
Yes.
know, with the exception of Corrigan, my partner, posting and publishing. But you have to understand the details. You have to do everything yourself until you can kind of build that credibility and that leg to stand on to hire the team. You know, you have to put yourself into that position of leadership through experience. You can't just hire
Yes.
the team out the gate. So, that to say that this is very much so your baby. You have looked at every aspect of this process. You are self-taught in the creation of magazines, and now it's come to the point where you are driving a lot of these decisions at a very granular level, like spine measurements, right? Like paper thickness, comparing old to new issues, and you're creating a product that is as much yourself as it is a reflection of what the streets may eventually turn into as a bigger organization, which is cool. How does this compare to previous issues with regards to physical output? Me, the layman, doesn't really understand any of the nuances of the differences, but do you look at this and being so close to it, are there things that you love about it, things that are these little details that frustrate you? How do you see this issue?
I think the issue turned out great. I think one problem that we have every year, this is like a technical issue, is that the amount of magenta that the printer uses every year always is an issue.
Too much or too little magenta?
Too much magenta.
Okay.
And in certain lights, it looks pretty good in this light. Black and white photographs are super sensitive to color, because when you print with actual ink, you know, it's the CMYK, so it's actually the mixtures of the colors. And in certain lights, you'll notice, like in natural light, it'll look perfect, and then you get in under other lights,
Right.
and it'll be like, oh my gosh, there's too much magenta. So we're always going back and forth and back and forth. They're like, well, check it in this light, check it in that light.
Yeah.
So you always have to get that balance of people are going to be reading it in different types of lights, so you have to kind of balance the color, and so that's always an issue, and that's one thing that I'm learning, and they're great at helping me with that. But that's always an issue every year with dealing with the black and whites and making sure they're not too red.
Yeah, but
Because in
all
some
still,
lights, sometimes they turn out and you're like, back off with the magenta.
Yeah, but all still put together by you, design-wise.
Yes.
You
Yes.
do the full composition, layouts, everything in InDesign and on your own.
Yes, so I laid everything out in InDesign, and always trying to get better at graphic design. So
Yeah.
I'm always getting inputs, and that's another thing this year that I'm like, I want to sit down with, like, and I have in the past, but other graphic designers and be like, okay, how can we improve this? What do we need to change? What do we need to shift around?
Right.
So I'm always trying to get advice from other people with more experience in certain areas than I have.
Right. Well, brilliantly done. This looks fantastic. Having compiled everything yourself, the theme has remained generally consistent in terms of styling, but the magazine just continues to get better and better with every release that you've put out from 2016,
Yes.
2017 to 2018. So congratulations
Well,
on
thank
that. A really, really, really beautiful book. You gave it to me the other night. I immediately went home, and me and my girlfriend Nikki just sat there for 30 minutes flipping through it. We went to Artoberfest, Corrigan and I, on Saturday with this book, and so many people approached us about it and asked us about what the streets were, what the book was. So really, really beautiful, gorgeous. Congratulations. I think now we should do a little walkthrough
Great.
of this gallery and see a lot of these works that are actually in the magazine, highlighting the artists and the photographers that are in the book, and seeing this kind of come to life in this space and with the party that you've designed. So we can do that.
Great, yeah. So we invited all the Atlanta artists that were in the 2018 collection to show their work. And this is in the Atlanta Photography Group gallery. And so this is Howard Levinson. He actually, I love his work because he took most of these shots in the 90s with film and developed them himself in his laundry room. So old school print. We called our party the print party because I feel like even photographers these days don't even print out a lot of their work. You have thousands and thousands of photographs that are just digitally stored somewhere, and then they kind of get lost. So I really like printing out the work. That's why I like making the print edition so you can hold it in your hand and it doesn't get lost. I feel like because we have so many digital photos, they just kind of get lost. You see them once, you post them on Instagram, and then they're gone. So this is a great physical way to capture them and be able to display them.
So are these original prints that he developed
Yes.
in his laundry room?
So these are prints he developed in his laundry room in the 90s, most of them. Some of them are early 2000s, but most of them 90s. You can see the Red Hot Chili Peppers down here, early days.
Yep. It's an early flea shot.
Yes. So he loves music, so he has a lot of band shots, but he also goes out in the streets and actually sees, like, some of these are prostitutes in Arizona that he has photographs that he would go out there and talk to them and ask them if he could take their picture. So he's like really getting in the streets.
Yeah, getting in there at a time when it was a little less acceptable to be having a camera in front of somebody's face, right? I mean, nowadays everybody with smartphones and DSLRs is out there photographing everything all the time, but back in this day and age when you had an actual film camera in the days without smartphones, I imagine a lot more pressure on the photographer to go in. And now, is he the only artist here that actually has developed his own film on display, or is there other work? Is there other
I'm
examples
looking
of
around
film
to
work?
make sure. I think he is in this show. I think everybody else probably had it printed somewhere else.
Well, can we go check some of that out?
Sure.
Cool.
Let's go.
Let's go for a walk. So this is, I love this space, first of all, just because of how bright and interactive it is. It's really, it welcomes you into this environment where you kind of feel that you're okay, like touching, playing around, talking to other people. It kind of tears down the walls a little bit, you know? It's not like an Ansel Adams, like, a little stoic viewing. It's a very
Well,
community
we wanted it
oriented.
to be very welcoming, and I actually even for the show hung up pieces of the magazine. So
cool.
like
Okay.
this, like actual pages from the magazine to kind of show you what their article looked like and kind of bring the magazine to life on the walls.
So is this something that you physically went and cut out of a magazine, or is this an example of something the printer sent you?
This is what the printer says. This is part of the proofs, so the printer would send the proofs just all loose sheets, and I was like, oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I can hang this on the wall. So
Now is every page of the magazine sent to you in a proof?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually got 2 proofs. So I mean, sometimes they don't offer that up front, and I'm like, I have to see the printed version before you make all these books.
Why would you not offer that
I had them send me every single page of the magazine.
That's smart.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a huge shame if you had 349 beautiful pages, and page 12 was like just a total load of garbage. So
they always offer to send me a PDF, and I'm like, how does that help? I can see it on my computer already.
Right.
I don't know how that's going to help me. I need to see how you're printing it.
Right. So this is cool. So we have a piece of the actual magazine here. This is Courtney Jones, photographer.
Yes.
We've got a signed piece by her up here, right in the middle above the magazine, and then she's got her own little wall right here.
So this is her own little wall. Mexico, Coney Island, and Atlanta represented.
Okay.
So very diverse locations, but I felt like hers, all of her photos kind of have a sense of nostalgia to them, even though they've been made pretty recently. So I kind of liked her vibe, even though she was capturing different locations. They all kind of have a sense of nostalgia to them.
Yeah, I love it. You have this whole kind of Coney Island carnival swing ride. You've got this, it looks like Atlanta from the Jackson Street Bridge.
Yep.
But a different perspective on the kind of classic photo that everybody takes of the Jackson Street Bridge, blurred out with traffic, you can tell. I like it. That's a view I see every day on my commute out, so it's nice to see kind of a different perspective on it. But this is very cool. Okay, and how much of this now is
So that
Courtney?
stuff's her. So this is all Gay Allen.
Okay, I'll let you kind of lead the way here.
So she did these great photographs in, I think, the Brook Run skate park here in Atlanta, in Dunwoody, I think it is. And I like her work because she tends to do more geometric, like you can just see in all of her shots, especially this one on the end is my favorite.
Let's go to it.
I love the geometric lines in this, and then this little red bench at the top. I just think that's perfect.
You wouldn't know what this was unless you were to see the entire kind of wall of her work, which I think is super, super cool. Having this standalone and taking a look kind of more deeply into this, but also how it kind of compares to the rest of the wall is it's very cool. And you can tell, here's one thing that's really interesting, is you can tell distinctly the kind of like styles of these photographers and how you're picking them as a curator to go into the magazine, right? It's not all the same.
Right.
It's you are clearly looking for different perspectives, but also different like ways that people use the lens to form their compositions. Right. So very cool. Don't really have anything smart to say. I want to kind of add like some colorful commentary, but it's a bit distracting in here, honestly. Like it's different sitting at a table and asking an interview when you're looking at somebody versus when you're surrounded by really kind of varied and colorful and cool art. Yeah. And I'm the kind of person that gets distracted easily. You get distracted easily. Well, I get distracted easily by artwork because I like to pay attention. And
look at it in
looking
detail.
at it. So
this part was kind of inspired by Forward Warrior. So every year in the summer, when it's very, very hot outside, I mean, like 40 different muralists painted murals all down Wiley Street in Tennelle. And I love going down there to photograph them in action every year. And so we had Austin Blue show his work. Yes. He was here's a picture of him painting his mural this year.
And there's Nikki Zarabi here at the bottom left.
Nikki Zarabi.
Huh. That's really cool. That's great that you have this because we've talked about this on the show a few times with different artists. Joe, Nikki, talking about Peter's kind of vision for the wall as an end product and how he curates it and how he positions it. And it's cool taking a look at the wall is obviously meant to represent kind of one whole piece made up of different components, right? But it's cool taking those components out of the perspective of the wall and looking at them just kind of one-on-one, like you're doing here. Like you're breaking out this one piece or these single pieces and you're putting together the story of how the one mural was put together. And you don't get that when you're just driving down Wiley and you're seeing
Right.
all of them, you know, mixed up together, which is, I think, the beauty of what Peter is doing with the collage, and also with this, how it's a testament to every single individual piece that makes it up.
And I love to watch the artists as they work, and it's so collaborative. They always bring their friends and family, and sometimes strangers will pitch in, and it's just very interactive, just the process, and very generous with them doing these murals for free. And it is so hot every year when they're painting. I'm always like, oh my gosh, how do you do this?
But it's democratic, you know. It's
Yes.
like it's tearing down that wall a little bit between the public and the artists, because you're putting these people in neighborhoods, in these very residential communities, and you're inviting people who live there to come out and say, look, what I'm doing, interact with me. I'm creating something that's going to be a part of your community long after I leave here today.
Yeah.
You know?
And they're always so nice to talk to everybody who comes up to them while they're working on this. I mean, they'll just chat with people.
Yeah.
So it's a great way to meet the artists and ask them about their work and their process.
This. Yeah. So we've got Austin's pieces here on the wall.
Yes, so his piece is on the wall. And then also we have Janice and Leela's pieces next to him, because they also are always in Forward Warrior. But the funny thing was, last year I was at a party for my husband's office, and someone mentioned the Streets magazine and me interviewing muralists, and someone turned around and said, wait, you know muralists? And I was like, yeah. And she said, I need a muralist. I have this huge wall, and she was doing marketing for shops around Lenox.
Okay.
And they were looking for, she said, we've been looking for a muralist for months. And I was like, well, I don't think they're that hard to find. There's a lot of muralists in Atlanta. And she was like, but I want to pay you to help me find a muralist. And I was like, okay. I was just getting out my phone. I was going to show her a picture. I was like, I have tons of ideas, because she told me where it was, and their demographic is very female and fashion. And I mean, immediately I thought of Leela, and I was like, that would be perfect. So I was just going to give her her name, and got out my phone. She was like, no, I want you to coordinate this. So
you've got Leela Burnett and Janice Rigo here.
Leela, and then she was like, I have always wanted to do a mural with Janice, and so she got her involved. And it was a very, very long process to get the contract worked out, and the scheduling and all that kind of stuff. But finally we got it worked out, so that they painted this it was the biggest, it was like 55 feet long, it's the wall behind Dantana to the shops around Lenox, so it's like several stories tall. And so I went out and photographed them while they were painting it.
That's cool.
And it was like a wind tunnel. I mean, it was so cold. They were wearing like 2 pairs of sweatpants and hoodies, and the whole time they were painting, it was like wind was whipping through there. So that's why I titled their piece Female Warriors, because if you could have felt, I mean, talking about the heat, so they went from summer and then painting in the winter, and these muralists just endure all kinds of strange temperature.
This was one of my favorite pieces from the magazine when I came through here on Saturday, just because of the way that you've juxtaposed the artists who are involved in both Forward Warrior and these murals, and titled the piece Female Warriors. So many different kind of overlapping themes that you're using to create a very cohesive message. I think that the way you've structured these different parts of the magazine and put them together is very cohesive in a way that I think it just shows a lot more thought and care than maybe you even intended to put in there, because it seems like you have a whole team of people behind you in some publishing office working on this, because it's all that to say, it's very, very well done. It's very well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do feel like one of my favorite things is finding connections between things. I get really excited when I can find a thread that runs through things. I think I just naturally gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that
so
you see
good
that
in the magazine. Yeah, it's wonderful. So, Meredith, with you and with the Streets, what is next as we go into 2019, as you've wrapped up yet another successful year with the 2018 print release? What can we expect from you in the coming year? What can we expect from the Streets in the coming year?
Well, I hope to just continue to improve it, both in the interviews. I hope to do more sit-down interviews, in-depth interviews, get more stories from people, find out more about them. continue with the great quality of art and photographs that we've had in the past. Get better even with the design and layout of the magazine, get other people involved. Like, for example, after I was on the first podcast, you had one of my books laying on your coffee table, and then Joe King came in and saw it and said, "What is this?" And then you connected us, so we're actually going to work with him for one of the issues.
That's
and,
awesome.
Hopefully he's going to be a guest editor, and we're going to put together some stuff with him, so that'll be great to have him involved.
Nice.
So hopefully collaborating more with other artists in Atlanta to just make it even better.
Yeah. Well, if there's anything that we can do at all to help on top of this, please let us know. We're really, really proud to have this in our city. We're proud to have worked with you, to know you, and thanks again for suggesting this and for coming back and being on the show, and hopefully more releases and more shows to come.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.